everyone. Welcome back to Her Happy Mind Yaps, where on today's episode, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Mishel, who's a expert in recovering from narcissistic abuse. And I've asked her all the good questions, and I just sat back and became a learner of what happens to your brain neurologically when you are in a narcissistic relationship and what to do for your nervous system when you get out of one. And I cannot wait to even do a part two. We talked about so much, and this is for you or to send to a friend that is currently in that situation or who may need to hear this. But I do want to give a little side note that please watch this when you are ready. Everyone's story, everyone's journey is different. And so if you are not ready to listen to this, just save it and you can always come back for another time. So let's get started and let's welcome Dr. Mishel. Today I have Dr. Mishel, who is your narcissistic abuse recovery expert. I'm super excited to have her on the show and just talk a little bit more about the brain science and lived experiences that if you have gone through it, or especially Dr. Mishel who's gone through it, she can kind of help you get over the narc abuse that you have been dealing with or have dealt with. She's a doctor, an author, a coach, and I'm super excited. We're going to have some packed questions for her. So welcome, Mishel.
Hello, so glad to be here. Thank you for highlighting the need for this discussion because I think there are so many people suffering like in the darkness, right? And feeling invisible. And so I'm just here to shout it from the rooftops to let them know they're not alone.
Absolutely. And it is like a hard topic. And that's what I kind of like what this conversation is going to be about is like, I'm really going to be the learner, right? And I have a bunch of questions to ask you, and you are the expert. And it's another reason why I love social media is because I would have never connected with your page if it wasn't
Right?
for it. So there is good that comes out of social media for your brain. And today is one of them. So, Dr. Mishel, can you just maybe go over a little bit about who you are and what inspired you to specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery?
So it actually found me, excuse me, and I was so like it starts with my biological father, and I didn't really even put these pieces together until like I was much older. But like my biological father was a malignant narcissist, sociopath, and my mom, he was very abusive, both on the narcissistic level and also the physical level. And so my mom and my brother and I, my mom had took us out in the middle of the night when I was like 4 to escape from him. And it had been several attempts that she had had, before she was able to like actually get out. And so then I always knew like that wasn't normal, but like, you live as a kid and you kind of just do whatever. And so as I got older, I started to realize that it was impacting me, like why I didn't feel like I was wanted, because it's like if your parent leaves you, how much can you be really wanted, and like that kid mind. And I didn't realize it was an issue with him. I thought it was an issue with me. And so I kind of carried that with me. And I always knew I wanted to, because of that, I wanted to help other people. And I thought that it was going to be through law school. And so I went to law school and was like, I hate this. This is not at all how I want to help people. And so I went back and talked to a career coach and reevaluated. And he said, have you ever thought of social work? And I was like, not in a minute, like not in a million years would I have ever thought of social work. Turns out social work is what I'm made for. And so I got my MSW and became a school social worker. And then I started to kind of notice, I got into private practice after I was had been a school social worker, got my PhD, and started to realize like all of these stories that I was hearing, I'm like, this sounds crazy to me. Like what's this dynamic that I'm realizing? And so I had started learning more about like narcissism and personality disorders. And I remembered back in grad school, we had spent out of all of grad school, including my MSW and my PhD, we spent one class period, like, so what, 3 hours on all of the personality disorders. And we were told, you know what, these personality disorders, they're so rare, you're never going to come across them in practice. So we're just going to kind of gloss over them. But in my practice and in actually my personal life too, I was able to look back and be like, wait a second, I'm divorced from a narcissist. And I didn't even realize. And then when I started to learn like the manipulations and the patterns and everything, I'm like, so that was my biological father. That was my ex-husband. That was then we were in a relationship with some friends who actually was our pastor and his wife. And turns out he was like the definition of like what a narcissist is, like their patterns and what they look like in public versus behind closed doors. And I was like, how did I miss this? Like, this is what I do for a living. Like, this is my passion. This is, I want to help people. How have I been missing all of these things? And so I really dove into understanding more about narcissism and the patterns and kind of their playbook. And I was like, these people have been getting away with all of this damage and all of this abuse for generations. And no one's been understanding what's been going on. And so narcissists have been getting away with it forever. And the victims are the ones that have been injured and abused and holding the bag, so to speak, and feeling like they're the crazy ones and they're the ones at fault. And I was like, this can't keep happening. This is terrible. So then I was like, I'm going to, use the platform to educate people about it so that what they're seeing, they actually can make sense of and not hold on to it as their flaw or something, they should have done differently or better or should have known, because we don't know what we don't know. And so that's kind of how I got into it, because I'm like, it's just ridiculous that they're getting away unscathed and all of their victims they're leaving, behind. And it just wasn't fair. And I was like, these people are everywhere. And I'm running into them all the time. And so that's kind of the short, not so sweet story about how I got into it.
That's actually like insane how you spent like one class out of your like whole degree of of these different personality disorders. Like
Mhm.
that's actually wild because I don't know if it's you can let me know, but maybe it's just because I just got into the space of especially for me around positive psychology, but
Mhm.
I feel like narcissistic abuse or a lot of more people are aware of it now, and there's like more books and more people coming out speaking about it, whether that's like for yourself getting help after you've dealt with it or
Mhm.
how to spot one. I think is that kind of I don't want to say it's like a trending thing, but have you noticed maybe with your clients more and more people are coming or more people are stepping out and being like, "Hey, I've dealt with one and or I'm dealing with one, I need help."
Yes, absolutely. It is kind of the buzzword
Yeah.
of, I don't, the day, the year, the decade, whatever. And I think it's a great thing when people understand it. I think a lot of people, I have been having a lot more people, clients come to me knowing upfront that they think they're dealing with a narcissist. Whereas in the past, it used to be kind of like they would be describing these things and holding the blame themselves. And I would have to kind of be the one to bring up, well, do you think there's any maybe narcissism going on? And then educate like what that is and all of the things. So a lot now people are coming to me with that as what they think is going on, and then there are the people who think that that's what's going on, and it's really not. They just don't understand what narcissism is, and so there's some of those conversations to happen too, kind of reverse engineering it, right? To be like, okay, I know that that's what but I don't know that that's the right label. It's definitely something that's abusive, and we need to talk about it, but not all abuse is narcissistic abuse. And so just kind of getting the clarification for people so that, the label isn't necessarily important, but as far as like, we don't need to label everybody a narcissist, but we do need to understand what we're saying when we are using that label.
Absolutely. And so what do people commonly like misunderstand about narcissistic abuse?
So, in my experience, most people think narcissism and narcissistic abuse is basically being around somebody who I call like a me monster, who always just wants to talk about themselves, right? And that's definitely a type of narcissist, right? Like that's the grandiose narcissist that most people think of, where, they enter the room and it's all about them, right? And if you're not talking about them, then they're just disinterested in you. And that is I always call them flavors. That is a flavor of narcissism. But narcissistic abuse is actually not that. It's really like, it's an abuse that works in the brain, very similar to, um, like an addiction. It's very invisible a lot of, I mean, pretty much all the time at first, especially because it happens in such small, mini kind of abuses, so to speak. It's like, it's not, they don't generally come out and be like, I'm a narcissist and I'm going to tell you that you're stupid. They they'll love bomb you and they'll like totally ingratiate you and like get you into like their circle, and then they'll start laying these seeds of doubt, right? To be like, wow, they'll say something to where you think they think the world of you and you think they think you're perfect and you're wonderful and you think the same of them, and then they'll make these little things that make you they'll say these little comments, that make you start to question your own reality. The gaslighting thing, they'll start to make you doubt yourself, make you doubt your self-confidence, make you doubt your choices, make you doubt your memory. And like a, it's not this necessarily overt, everybody can see it kind of thing, because a lot of times it's abuse that happens behind closed doors. It's abuse that happens to people who, the people who know the abuser on the surface, they think, oh, this person is wonderful, right? They're charming, they're helpful, they're funny, they're the life of the party, they're quiet. Covert narcissists are quiet, they're more laid back. And so the people who only know them on a surface level think they're wonderful. But the people who know them best behind closed doors, that's where the abuse happens. That's where like that invisibility and cloak of abuse happens, where the narcissist comes in and they, tell you all these wonderful things, but then they say subtle things like, well, are you sure that your family has your best interest at heart? Are you sure your friend isn't jealous of you? You sure you should really wear those pants, that shirt, that color? I didn't think you'd really be smart enough to make that decision. Those kinds of things where you kind of are like, what? But they love me. So why would they say, so certainly they have my best interest at heart too. So why would they be saying these things to me to make me doubt myself when they love me, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a friend, whatever. Right. And so it really is like just that mind game. That really starts to form a trauma bond. It starts to rewire the chemicals in our brain, and it's invisible. So it's not what most people think. To kind of bring that back, it's not the person who walks into the room and thinks that they're just the greatest thing going and wants to talk about themselves. It's the intentional abuse and the erosion of the victims, our sense of self, our sense of belief in ourselves, our sense of safety, our sense of reality. It's that erosion really is what the abuse starts with and really is wrapped around.
You definitely brought up some amazing points, and even those examples too of like, okay, like you said at the beginning, sometimes people are like, oh, I'm dating a narcissistic, but then you're like, well, hold on a minute, maybe it's something else. But just having those little examples that you gave, it kind of gets you thinking as well, because I'm sure you don't always know, especially if maybe if someone gets into a narcissistic relationship, but maybe their father or their mother wasn't. So for them, it's like brand new, and they're like dealing with this new kind of like icy hot relationship.
Mhm.
And for them,
Yeah.
it might be confusing at the same time of like, well, I've never experienced this before, so this must be love. Or like, does that work as well, where people go in kind of blindfolded?
Absolutely, because a lot of times, and this is what people don't realize as well, narcissists have like a type, kind of, where they look for people who are trusting, empathetic, people who maybe have gone are in the middle of a transition. They look for people where they can exploit their weakness. Where, empathy and compassion, that's not a weakness, but to a narcissist, they know that that's a soft spot that they can exploit. And so when, if you're someone who has never experienced narcissism, because maybe like your family has been very healthy and you then meet this narcissist, what draws us in a lot of times is the intensity of the relationship, right? Because narcissists, one of the things, and the more you study narcissism, the more you see that there is really a playbook. There are patterns that, no matter if they're covert, malignant, grandiose, whatever, that they use kind of this playbook, and there's these patterns that they all follow in their different flavors. And so one of the things that is really a red flag to me is how intense something is in the beginning, whether it's good or bad. Because narcissists like to move very quickly, right? Like a lot of times I hear, well, he or she said, I love you within like 3 days. We got married within 3 months. My boss promoted me within a week. My new friend said that we're best friends, before we even knew each other for, a minute. And so it's very fast and very, very intense. And that feels good to us, right? Like there's nothing that feels better than us feeling like we're wanted and we're seen and we're valued. And it's so good, right? It's that dopamine that gets released. And narcissists know this. They might not know like, the technical term and what's happening, but they know that in their past, these things have worked for them. And so they just continue to hone their craft. And then they're new whenever they spot someone that they're like, oh, I can get something from you. I can either get like narcissistic supply attention. I can get a date. I can find somebody to marry me. I can find somebody who will do my bidding. I can find, whatever they see that they can like exploit from you. They're like, okay, and I'm going to move fast because I don't want them to have any reason or any time to start to sit back and think and put pieces together and think of actually leaving me. I actually want to really get them entwined into my life as fast and as powerfully and intensely as possible. And so that's super fun and feeling great for those of us who don't know what's going on, right? Because we don't. The narcissist is the only one who knows that they're on the hunt, basically.
So they know what they're doing. Like, because I always think like psychologically maybe they aren't aware, but are they, is it more of a habit that they've just kept doing that now to them it's normal, or do they know what they're doing is wrong, but they're like, it's working for me? Like, is there like a fine line of like how much they know is like you said, the guidebook, or is it just for them they were kind of born like that?
So yes to all of that.
Okay.
So narcissism, just like anything, is on a spectrum, right? There's some who are super extreme, all the way to the ones who are just the me monsters who just like to talk about themselves and are kind of annoying, right?
Yeah.
And so when you get into where it's more abusive, excuse me, yes, they know what they're doing. Again, they might not know that it's like the clinical term or why they're doing what they're doing, but the way you can test that is narcissists are very good at only doing things when no one else sees, right? So they don't do these things in public. If they knew that it was like not wrong, they would do these things in public, right? They do it behind closed doors where there's no witnesses, where they can be the one in control, where they can be the one to make us doubt ourselves and question what happened. So when people say like, oh, narcissists have no ability to control themselves, that is actually false, right? Because they do. They absolutely do, because they don't do it, in front of other people. They don't do it in the middle of downtown. Some of them will, right? Some of them, again, it's a spectrum. Excuse me. Some of them will act poorly because they just don't care. But the majority of narcissists only do things where they can have plausible deniability. That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. You're being too sensitive. And then they'll bring in other people, right? They'll be like, oh, well, so and so thinks that you're too sensitive too. So and so probably has never even had a conversation with the narcissist, right? But we trust the narcissist so inherently that we're like, oh my gosh, yeah, we just take them at their word, right? Like, okay, you know, I guess I must be too sensitive because they said that they talked to my friend and my friend said the same thing, even though my friend had no idea and never was part of this conversation. So they do it behind closed doors. That's a really good test that you can look for to see if do they really know what they're doing. It is how they're wired. A lot of people, another thing that like people believe as a truth about narcissism and personality disorders in general is, oh, this is because of a childhood trauma. And research has been done over decades and even up to the most recent research has found that is not true. There's a ton of people who have had childhood trauma. I don't know if you've heard of the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experience. And it was where they studied children who have had adverse childhood experiences over like years and years, and they find out, how the person turned out in spite of these adversities, and it could be abuse, it could be neglect, abandonment, earthquakes, like any of those things. And what they've found is that it's not the trauma that turns somebody into a narcissist. It makes someone more susceptible to that trait coming out, but it's actually a trait that's in their brain. And so they found that personality traits are about 75% genetic, and that's for any personality trait. When it comes to personality disordered people, that's actually even a higher percentage. So it's really genetics and then life, kind of like nature nurture. Life situations and life events can either be protective factors to where those narcissistic traits actually get, kind of calmed down, or they're increased, right? So can a trauma impact somebody who's genetically predisposed to being narcissistic? Absolutely. Does it cause narcissism? No. So that's what the research has been finding. And so it is genetic. It is something like how they're born with it. But they do absolutely know that what they're doing and how they're treating people is wrong because they hide it, right? Like if
Mm,
you think of someone who is um, ADHD, someone who is on the autism spectrum, they're who they are all the time, right? They don't just wait to show their autistic, tendencies behind closed doors,
mm,
right? They're just who they are. Narcissists are different. They put on a facade, they have this image, and then behind closed doors is where the monster comes out.
mm. I like that example of like, yeah, if you're an autistic person, yeah, you're not just behind closed doors. And I think that's like you were saying, like the mind games that it plays with you and kind of you start questioning yourself. And if we can take it back, because I love, and I, as well as you, I know we both kind of fangirl over like the brain science for
Absolutely.
both of us. So what does like a narcissistic, abusive relationship or person do to your brain neurologically?
So, goodness, excuse me. So, the narcissism, the narcissistic abuse, what it does to our brain is it activates the primal part of our brain, the amygdala, right? To where we are in constant fight or flight mode. And it takes the prefrontal cortex, which is where all of our problem solving skills and our rational thinking and emotional regulation, all of that is in our prefrontal cortex. And so that all kind of goes offline when our amygdala is trying to keep us alive. Because our brain's number one job, as you know, is to keep us alive. Right. And so it's constantly, when it feels it's in a situation of threat, it's going to shut off the problem solving skill area, right? It's going to go offline, kind of like if you have you're in, like you're using your phone and the internet goes offline. You can't access it, right? You can't access the internet until the connection is back. Well, when we're in a narcissistic abuse type situation, it starts to make our brain go in this cycle of like the dopamine and then the cortisol and the dopamine and the cortisol and the dopamine and the cortisol. And it actually changes the connections in our brain. It changes our brain. Like they've done these brain scans and like the brain of a victim who's had trauma and narcissistic abuse looks different than the brain of someone who has not. And so it puts your brain into this constant survival mode. And it has like your cortisol is always um, like firing and running rampant, basically. So if you think of it like, we're meant to have that cortisol adrenaline response to threat, right? We want it there, right? It's kind of like the smoke detector. We want a smoke detector to tell us when there's smoke or fire. Well, when we are in an abusive situation constantly, we never like our it spikes. And what it's meant to do is like when we sense threat or danger, our cortisol and adrenaline spikes. It's meant to, right? To get us into fight or flight to be ready for action. But what happens in a narcissistic relationship is it never comes back down to baseline. So you never get that relief, right? It's kind of like if you are driving down the road, and I think Mel Robbins uses this example in her anxiety book, but it's a great example for this, I think. So if you're driving down the road and you're about to change lanes, and you're fine, right? But then as you're about to change lanes, you see that there's a car that's flying up alongside of you and it almost hits you. And so you jerk your car back into the lane that you were in. And like what happens, right? Your adrenaline spikes, your cortisol spikes, your heart rate is crazy. But as soon as you see the car is gone, your mind is like, okay, the threat is gone. Things can come back to normal. And we kind of like calm down, right? When we're in a narcissistic relationship, that threat never goes away, right? We're constantly wired to go from feeling like safe and trusting ourselves to unpredictability, right? And walking on eggshells. And that's so our brain gets rewired around that threat because our brain really seeks predictability and familiarity above all else. So even when that predictability is I'm walking on eggshells and I doubt myself and I'm not really sure what this person is, is it going to be the lady or the lion who comes through the door? Um, if that becomes the predictable pattern, our brains become addicted to staying there. And so it rewires our brain. It makes our brain function constantly at this level. We never come down to a level of feeling safe, safe because we're always waiting for the next shoe to drop. And it's that constant, that intermittent reinforcement, right? That narcissists give us. So it's the love bombing, like, I love you, you're the best thing ever. And that feels good, right? We love that. Of course. Yes, I love, I do like being the best thing ever. That's great. Thank you. And then the devaluation, right? And the gaslighting and all of that, and the discard. And then we feel like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And our brain is like, wait a second, I don't like this. I want to go back to where I'm feeling great and I get that dopamine hit. And so our brain's like, well, just try harder. Just see if you can do more for this person because then maybe they'll give you that dopamine hit again. They'll give you that reinforcement that things are okay.
Yeah.
And so we stay like in that cycle.
And is that because of the research too? It shows that that's why trauma bonding is so powerful because you get a shot of dopamine, and then when you're coming down, your cortisol level gets another shot, and then you're constantly just like trying to ride this roller coaster of like highs and lows, but trying to stay content. Like, is that why people stay longer than they should? Is because they've bonded so much over things and they are still doing it together?
And yes. And so a lot of the best way I've heard to describe a trauma bond is the same one who hurts you is also the one who heals you. And
Mm.
it is that constant, like, especially with narcissists, they isolate you from so many other people that they become your only like point of contact. And so if you feel like you're going to be getting any kind of reinforcement or any kind of support, it has to come from that person, right? That's why they like it, right? They want to be your touch point, your cornerstone, right? And so your brain gets addicted to like waiting for that next dopamine hit. And, the same one who hurts you is also the one who heals you. So you're constantly waiting and you're constantly thinking, oh my gosh, like I just need to get back there. And then with all of the gaslighting and all of the love bombing, we like our brains are awesome and so powerful, but they almost work against us in this kind of situation because we believe that, well, wait a second, the person that I met initially or the person that I see in public who's so nice to everybody else is only mean to me. So it must be me. And so then we think it's on us to try harder to get them to be, oh, that's the person they really are. That's the person who I can get back as long if I can just fix me, right? And the narcissist loves that because they can just sit back and watch us flounder, right? They can sit back and watch us try to do more for them, right? Because a narcissist, let's be honest, they want the most they can get with the least amount of their own effort. And so they can sit back and they just kind of, they weave this web that we get entangled in where we think they're this wonderful person that if we can just figure out what we're doing wrong, that's who they'll be again. And so we become bonded with that. We become addicted, that cycle of the intermittent reinforcement, right? It's the same kind of thing that keeps that makes a like a substance addiction so strong, right? It's that constant need for that high again, right? And it's rewiring our brain. It is not a confidence issue. It's not a character flaw. It's not a weakness. It's a brain physiological issue that has been conditioned and has been created by the narcissist, the intermittent reinforcement, that dopamine cortisol cycle. Um, and like we basically get addicted to the narcissist, even when we know that's not right. Like that was mean, that was horrible, that I'm scared. Our brain is still addicted. Just like if you talk to anybody who's struggling with substance use, right? They're like, I know I shouldn't have that next drink. I know I shouldn't skip work to go, do this, go gambling. It's the same type cycle, right? So it's not a weakness or a character issue. It's that trauma bond, the intensity that we talked about before, where it's like, oh my gosh, this just feels so good. I want to get back to that, right? We're seeking that high. And it's the physical. I just did a talk a couple weeks ago about how like our emotions and our needs and stuff, it's not just a weakness because we have emotions. It's actually like a physiological brain issue that has been created by the abuse that the narcissist brings into our lives.
Wow, I think a lot of people listening right now, just listening the last like minute or two about how it's like not a character weakness, or it's not a confidence issue. It's just if you stay with someone so long, yeah, you rewire your brain and now your brain is addicted to that. So I think a lot of people can be hard on themselves. I'm sure with the people that you coach of like, how did I get myself in this situation? Why did I stay so long? Or I'm such an idiot. Like, how could I be so fooled? But you just summed it up so perfectly. It's like not you. It becomes part of your rewiring process. And I think when it comes to gaslighting, and I'm sure in being in a narcissistic relationship, can you maybe explain, just like how you did before, around if you are in one or if you aren't, what does it mean to be gaslit or gaslighting the term? And then if you are in one, how does that affect your self-trust? If you're constantly being, your partner's gaslighting you so much, how does that erode your thought of like, can I still believe myself or believe other people?
So, and that's really where it's such an invisible abuse, but it's so devastating
Mm.
because one of the things that I think is criminal that narcissists do is they erode our own sense of reality and they erode who we are and they make us feel like we aren't worth anything and that there's no hope for us ever being worth anything to anyone, right? Because we start to hear their words as gospel truth and nothing else gets in, and that's what they want. And so gaslighting, it's actually from the movie, I think it's called Gaslight
Okay.
from it's like 1920 or something, 1930. It's like, forever old movie. But it was all about this, the story. And I have not watched the movie because it's old and I just couldn't make myself watch it. But the premise of it is this man and husband and wife, those old like oil lamps where you could turn, the more the wick was in
Yes.
the oil, the brighter the light would get. Well, something like he would go and he was dimming the lights in the room with these gas lanterns. And the wife would be like, "Did it just get dimmer in here?" And the husband would be like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. You must be crazy. What do you mean?" And he was doing this intentionally. He was going around and dimming the lights or brightening the lights in the room in the house. And she was noticing these things and being like, "Why is this happening?" And he's like, "Nothing's changing. What is wrong with you?" And so she ultimately went crazy in this movie. And so that's where the term gaslighting comes from. And gaslighting is when somebody else makes you question your own reality. And it's not like necessarily a lie. I mean, it is, but it's not like where somebody says, um, no, I didn't eat the cookie. And then you can show them and be like, oh, you ate the cookie. And they're like, yeah, okay, I got caught. It's more so like they're making you question your reality. Like if they're eating the cookie in front of you and you're like, I can't believe you're eating that cookie. And they're like, I'm not eating a cookie. What are you talking about? Because it's so absurd that someone would say that directly in front of you where you have, black and white evidence, like, but you're actually eating this cookie that I see, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? We, like, as healthy, normal people, we think that other people operate the same way we do. Narcissists do not. They will boldface lie and deny something, even though, like, if you had tech, and this is part of my lived experience, I black and white text message proof, like, I'm sorry, we're married, and like, you're on a dating site saying that you're divorced and you're looking for someone. Oh no, that's not what you think it is. What? Like, but no, you're overreacting. You're being too sensitive. Like it's those things where then you start to think, and over time, the portion of ourselves that feels strong and believes in ourselves and trusts ourselves, like, used to be up here and like our self-doubt would be like, we could actually be like, no, like they're lying. They're totally messing with me. Like our self-confidence lowers and our self-doubt raises. And so anything they say, instead of us questioning them, we start to question ourselves. And it's was I being too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Am I asking for too much? Right? That's a big thing. Oh, you just expect too much. And then you start to think, well, I guess maybe am I expecting too much? So I should expect less. Because going back to the brain science of it, our nervous system gets into this survival mode. And instead of focusing on what do I need, what do I believe, who can I trust, we start to live our lives to try to be small enough to avoid the conflict, the chaos, the threat. And so the gaslighting is one of the main ways that narcissists use to get us from feeling super strong in what we know and believe and trust to feeling super strong in only what they tell us. And we don't trust ourselves at all anymore. And it gets more and more as time goes on.
Well, number one, I love how you shared with us where the gaslighting term actually comes from. That would never heard of that story, but like the man, dimming the
Isn't
lights.
that crazy? Yeah.
That's an I'm like you. I'm like, will I ever watch that movie? Probably not, but I might go watch like a trailer if there's some like
Uh-huh.
little Reddit clips that I can look
Uh-huh.
at because yeah, like you start going crazy and I just turned 30 and I have a few friends that, are married or divorced or starting new relationships and you keep saying like I lost myself, but I don't know where I lost myself or how I lost myself because I used to be so confident, so energetic, so outgoing and I trusted myself and all this stuff. And then out of nowhere, you kind of flip that switch of like, how did this all happen so quickly? And then at the beginning of the call, you're like, it's just little things. And when we talk about habits for our brain, the smallest habits are the ones that make the biggest difference over time. So if you're living with this person or with this person, those little small comments or what they're not saying or what they are saying, and then your brain's like registering that. So I love how you're like painting this big picture because I could definitely see it more in my mind of how wrapped in you can be
Mhm.
in this relationship and being like, how do I leave when I literally forget who I am? And
Yep.
if someone does come to you, speaking about your practice, someone has come to you, they shared this with you, you're helping them, coaching them through it. What does like that early healing actually look like when someone's like, okay, I've been through it, I've noticed it, I'm trying to build through it, but how do I know I'm healing or is it I'm falling back? Is there something that you notice when you talk to a client? They're like, oh, okay, they're starting to move forward with this.
There usually is that aha moment where they're like, um, okay, now, now I know what this really is and I'm accepting it. And everybody's path is different, but every path is bumpy, right? So because we're so, habits are very powerful, right? And we get in the habit because of the conditioning of the narcissist, we get in the habit of like doubting ourselves and questioning our own like beliefs and needs and stuff. And so if I have a client coming in, I'm always very like slow to not necessarily slow like session wise. I'm not going to wait like 30 sessions to bring it up, but like it's super important for all of us if we're dealing with this kind of relationship to take it at our own pace, right? And the first thing is to recognize what is going on, right? So I'm never one who's going to come and be like that person's a narcissist when somebody's never even heard of the word, right? The things that we hear the most are things that come from ourselves, right? So if I can ask somebody, well, like, have you ever thought of like, what do you think with this behavior? What does this make you, when they say it, they actually hear it. If I were to tell somebody this is, what's going on, or this is, if they ask me, I can, of course, give that, insight. But it's really important that survivors of narcissistic abuse come to the realization on their own. Because like, well, first of all, I think it's harmful if somebody tells them and it's too fast, too much, right? Because we all have our own level of tolerance of how much we can handle. Because recognizing that we're in a narcissistic abuse can be very traumatic in itself, and it can be really scary because then it makes our brain have to think, wait a second, I probably need to do
Mhm.
something different. And doing something different not only scares us emotionally, but like freaks our brain out, right? Because our brain loves predictability and change is the opposite of predictability, right? I don't know, like, I know that right now this is bad, but if I make a change, am I going to make this worse? Or is what's out there that I'm going to change to going to be worse than what this is, like out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thing? And so, that's very scary. And so, everybody has their own tolerance and how fast they want to move. And so, letting someone kind of come to that realization in a way that is less threatening and less scary, but knowing that they're in an environment like with me or any of their support network is so important so that they know they're not alone and they know that they're are ways and systems that can get them from one step to the next to the next. And they don't have to, like, the saying of like, look at the step in front of you, not the whole staircase kind of thing. So it's really important to, like, for me anyway, in my practice, is to help someone recognize what's really going on, whether it's narcissistic abuse or not, at their pace. And, it's going to be uncomfortable, even though if it's at their pace, right? It's like going to the gym. And if you have been lifting 30 pounds and you want to lift 35, it's a stretch, right? Like you're going to push yourself a little bit, but that's a safe push versus if you go to the gym, you've never been to the gym, and you're like, I'm going to lift 500 pounds. Like that's harmful, right? So you have to kind of know, like, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be bumpy. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be second guessing and questioning and all of the things. But it's so important in my practice, and I think just in general, to honor where someone is, because sometimes I bring this up and people are like, yeah, I don't know that that's it. Okay. And then maybe we'll revisit when something else comes up. But to honor, I'm very focused on honoring the person who's sitting in front of me, and, giving them that little stretch of consider this, right? Just take it as information. Doesn't mean you have to blow up your life and like leave the narcissist or quit your job or cut off your family or whatever. Just think about it.
Mhm.
Right. So that's really my approach, because everybody is not in the same place when they walk through the door to see me or, click into an appointment. And so, yeah, it's really important to let them come to that realization. But then once they do come to that realization and they're ready to hit the ground running, well, then it's like game on. Right. And it's like, okay, we can, here's resources, here's strategies, here's an exit plan, here's a safety plan, here's all of these things. Right. So they're definitely not alone. But it is a scary thing to go through because it's confusing and emotional and painful and all of that.
And that curious side of me is wondering if survivors can, slowly heal and change and rewire, can narcissists change and heal and rewire, or no, because they would never even think of it because they always think they're right? Or is there hope for someone who is a narcissist to be like, let me get some help? Or no, is that like a lost cause? I'm just curious.
Oh, excuse me, research, and there's just been some research that came out, I think this fall. I think it was from Harvard. And it was like more studies on, do narcissists get better? And the study found no, basically they get worse. I have had experts in the field tell me that they've fixed narcissists. Um, so a narcissist, like if you look at the brain of a narcissist, like their centers of where empathy is are smaller than like a healthy person's, and like different parts of their brain are smaller than like a healthy person's. And so you basically like I look at it, the example I always use is like if you're looking at a Ferrari and you think,
Mhm.
wow, that's a beautiful car, and I bet it goes really fast. And then you open the hood and there's no engine. Like the car can look beautiful and great and fast all at once, but it doesn't have the engine installed, right? To be able to do all of the things it looks like it should be able to do. Narcissists look like they're wonderful and amazing and competent and adults and healthy and all the things, but they're missing those essential parts, like that engine that makes them able to do the things that like we would want them to have installed so that they could get better. With that being said, everything's on a spectrum, right? So are there some that could possibly be helped? Maybe research doesn't support that in my experience. Um, and to your other point of like, well, do narcissists think anything's even wrong with them in the beginning? No, right? So when you hear that, like, the narcissistic percentage is from like 2 to 6% of the population, which is still millions of people, by the way. Like that sounds really low, right? 2 to 6%, fine. Still millions of people. But typically the narcissist is not the one that's showing up in the therapy room, right? Because they don't think anything's wrong with them. The people showing up in the therapy room are the victims and survivors of the narcissist who are dealing with anxiety and self-doubt and depression and, all the things. And so if you don't show up in the therapy room, how can you be counted in the statistics, right? So, I mean, and different populations are going to have higher levels of narcissism because different different populations, different environments encourage narcissism, like Hollywood, politics, that kind of thing, right? Those kinds of behaviors are really supported and loved on in those kinds of, venues. Um, so narcissists aren't really going to show up in the therapy room to get better. So can they get better? I don't know. They're not showing up in the therapy room because they don't think anything's wrong with them. But also um, if they don't have like the wiring installed in their brains, like how can we, you know what I mean? Like how can they get better if they don't have the parts, right? And they don't have that, like what's called observing ego, to be able to look and see themselves and how they're impacting other people. They can't get that perspective. They're only looking at how they feel and what they want, So I always say, no, it's not possible to fix, a narcissist. Can you manage? Yeah, you can learn to manage, but it's all going to be on you because they're not going to ever be on board to change anything about themselves. They might say they will. A lot of them will say they will, but that's just what's called future faking, like, oh, I'll go to therapy, I'll get better. And it's usually a disaster. So, yeah. So, unfortunately, no, I don't think they get better.
Dang, but I really, really love your Ferrari example because it's so true. It's like exterior 10 on 10, but then
Yeah.
it's like never judge a book by its cover, but like, yeah, probably should when you see a narcissist, you're like, oh my God, okay, like you fooled me. But when I opened up the engine or when I opened up the book, I was like, okay, like should have had some
Uh-huh.
like warning labels before,
Uh-huh.
before doing that. And with what your practice that you do when the clients come and see you, are there any tools if you want to share like that help regulate their nervous system during recovery? Because I'm sure when they come to you, they're on like, s- even though they're like in a low
Mhm.
position or they're depressed or sad or, anxious, I'm sure they're still really riding that wave of cortisol and dopamine and like what's spiraling as well. Is there practices or tools that you give your clients that you're like, okay, let's start trying this to get your nervous system like back at an average level?
Yes, and I love that you asked that because I think so many people think when they think I have to heal from anything, whether it's anxiety, narcissistic abuse, whatever, they think it's has to be like I'm not going to get relief for weeks, months, years, right? It's this long, process. And on one hand, it is, right? Like on one hand, you're not going to flip a switch on a Tuesday and be totally normal as if nothing ever happened on Wednesday. But what I love to share with my clients is that there are things you can do today, right now, that can make you start to feel better, that you will notice a difference. And my favorite quote is, your future hasn't happened yet, right? So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm here right now. And so this is what the rest of forever is going to look like for me. Because you can start changing your future here right now by doing certain little things, right? Um, and so one of the things that I really like to do is I will usually ask, what if you had to pick one or two things? Because again, thinking of, oh my gosh, if I recognize this as narcissistic abuse, I'm going to have to change my entire life. That's very overwhelming for us, right? But if you think, what is something that is important to me right now? One or two things, really just one, right? But if you want it to be two things, we can do two things, right? And so I will ask them, like, what would help? Like, what are you feeling right now that you wish felt better? And a lot of them is like, well, I want my thoughts to stop racing, or I want to stop feeling crazy, or I want to be able to sleep, right? Or I want to be able to set a boundary, whatever that is. And so we come up with something that's, they're just like mini tasks, right? It's not even like go to the grocery store and get your grocery shopping done. It's like stop for 60 seconds and think of yourself and do like a lot of grounding techniques that I like to do. Um, Even just, I mean, like yesterday, I was like feeling super like just my nervous system was like on fire. And like I was in the shower and I was like, just stop, like feel me, my feet on the shower floor with the water hitting my feet, like those grounding techniques, right? Like, where do you feel your feet right now? And the cool thing about these nervous system rewires is that because what we're doing is we're rewiring our nervous system to know what safety feels like. Because when we're living up here in this fight or flight survival mode, safety actually feels very uncomfortable. And our brain will tell us, wait a second, this feels uncomfortable, so it must be wrong. No, uncomfortable just means it's new, right? But we cannot sustain up here. So we have to learn these little techniques 15, 30, 60, 90 seconds at a time. right? They're mini tasks. And so, and you can do them anywhere, right? You can be sitting in a meeting at work and feeling what your feet feel like on the floor and in your shoes, and nobody knows. But you're just intentionally turning inward instead of outward, looking for the narcissist. What are they going to do? What do they want? What do they say? You're turning inward and you're like, what do I need? If I want my nervous system to feel safe, I'm just going to feel my feet on the floor and I'm just going to sit 15 seconds, right? One of my favorite things to do is 4-7-8 breathing. So you breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, and you breathe out for 8. Because when you breathe out longer than you breathe in, it tells your nervous system you're safe. And if you can actually even tell yourself, I'm safe right now, as you're doing this, your nervous system is like, oh, this is what safety feels like. And I'm hearing that I'm safe and it feels good. So it's rewiring, right? And you can do that in the car. And then you just kind of repeat the 4-7-8. You can do it in when you're on the bus. You can do it when you're in a meeting. You can do it when, you're doing your kids' homework. You can do it whenever. So breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. And the example I always use is think about when you're singing. Singing actually is a really great way to help your nervous system because we're breathing out so much longer than we're breathing in. Because if say you're running down a dark alley at 2 a.m. and you hear something behind you, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, fight or flight, I just need to get out of here. Your breath is going to be up here and it's going to be short, shallow, and you're going to be breathing in a lot, right? So your nervous system knows that if you're breathing out longer than you're breathing in, it must be because you're in a safe place, right? Because if you weren't in a safe place, you would be breathing right up here and breathing in more. So if you're breathing out and you're singing, it tells your nervous system, wow, okay, I guess I'm safe. So those are the things that I just have little things like that I give depending on what the clients will say that they are looking for right now to help them as their tool of the week kind of thing so that they can start right now to feel better today and not have to wait, what seems like forever to get any relief.
Wow. Thank you for sharing just those little nuggets. And I'm sure our viewers are just going to take those little things and just being more mindful and present. Yeah, we're so on the go. We're so on high alert
Mhm.
sometimes that just ground yourself. That was very powerful. And I want to respect your time as well. So I know I wanted to ask you a few more things, but maybe we'll have to do a part two, or if there's someone listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if there's
I would
people
love to.
listening, just mark your questions down in the chat too, and that could be a part two. But Dr. Mishel, can you go over well, first, what is one thing you wish every survivor knew? And the second, where can they find you? I know you're also an author, so you can even mention the book for someone who is thinking about it or who may need it.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Michelle. It's spelled out DoctorMishel, and I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Um, and one thing, and so my book, I have a workbook where it's a guided journal, basically, and it has prompts to help you kind of get from where you are to understanding what's happened to finding your goals and finding, what you want to be different and kind of processing through feelings and experiences. And that's called Surviving Narcissism. And that's on Amazon. And then I'm the co author of the book called Chasing Rescue. And in there, you will find my co author's story of her escape and getting out of and healing from her abusive marriage. And then I have clinical tips in there for how to, understand what's been happening and things, tips and tools that you can use again starting today to help you on your healing journey. But the thing that I want survivors, even if because you're still a survivor, even if you're still in it, because you've survived. You didn't get this far just to get this far, right? You are surviving. And I want them to, like I said before, your future hasn't happened yet. Do not give up on it. And you are not alone. There are so many of us who have been where you are and who are fighting to bring awareness to this because we're fighting for each other and we're fighting to be the light to grab your hand because we've walked it. And so we know the path and we're here to grab your hand and help you on that path too, because you haven't walked it yet, but we have. And so we know kind of the roadmap, right? So future hasn't happened yet. And so just there's always that hope. And they're not alone. There's so many, and there's such power in community. So whether it's, you follow me on Instagram, or, there's so many of us who work together on the same goal that there's so many different communities. Um, but just find that community because your future hasn't happened yet. And there's so many of us who are wanting to hold your hand and help you get where you need to go.
That's beautiful. Well, Dr. Michelle, I feel like I just did a master class that, that yeah, I truly needed. I think our community needs, and I'm so grateful that we had this talk today and that you spent the hour. I know that there's gonna be people taking this away, and if you do need any questions, I'm sure she's always open to DMs or emails, and you seem like an amazing human being, and I'm just so grateful that we got to speak today, and I'm wishing you an amazing day. So thank you.
Thank you. I love what you're doing. I love your platform, and I'm just like addicted. So definitely fangirl. So thank you, thank you, thank you.